This is episode 24 and part 2 with Smiley Poswolsky.
Welcome to the QuarterLife Comeback Podcast, the show that empowers you to become the hero of your life's journey. With your host, Brian Tier.
Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the QuarterLife Comeback Podcast, episode 24 today, and we're picking up with part 2 of the interview with Smiley Poswolsky. Now, if you missed part 1, you can check that out from last week. It's at briantier.com/023, and we discussed, what is meaningful work, how to find it in your life. So I highly recommend you go check that out before listening to this episode. But in this episode, we cover Smiley's book, including the steps to creating your QuarterLife breakthrough. Smiley also shares a brilliant analogy for thinking about the modern-day career, contrary to the outdated career ladder approach. And I'll leave that for the interview so you guys can check it out. Anyway, in this episode, we're going to cover why following your passion is terrible advice and what to do instead, why you shouldn't quit your job just yet, why the career ladder model no longer makes sense, who will thrive in the new career market, and the best books that quarterlifers today need to be reading. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned in this part of the interview at briantier.com/024. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's go check out the rest of the interview with Smiley Poswolsky. All right, I want to get into the book because I think that's going to be the biggest takeaway for people. In the book, you kind of outline 10 steps to turn your quarter-life crisis into a breakthrough, and you've also in the process of republishing it now. So I wonder if you could just sort of give us a Cliff Notes version of that process, and also what's new in the sort of the newer version 2.0.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing is, first and foremost, understanding that you're not alone, right? That a lot of other people are going through this, that it's completely okay to be stuck in a job that everyone else thinks is awesome, but you're not happy with. And if that's the case, it means you need to make a change. So just because your friends think something's cool or your parents think you're great or everything else, doesn't mean that if you want to make a change, you should do it. And I think that that's important.
Yeah. And a change, just so we're clear, like I always tell people, like a change doesn't necessarily mean you just quit your job tomorrow.
Totally.
Yeah. But
right. I think that's super important. I think that's like, there's the kind of the blogosphere, the passion blogosphere has kind of made it like this simple, Instagram photo meme, like quit your job, follow your passion, change the world.
Travel the world and work from your laptop on the beach.
Yeah, it's not that simple. And that's not, I actually think follow your passion is really bad advice, because if your passion is something you're not good at, you shouldn't do it. And if your passion is, opening a yoga studio in San Francisco and there's 500 yoga studios on my block, that's not a good business idea either, right? So I talk much more about purpose in the book, which I think is a more useful framework than passion, because purpose is how do you want to help others? How do you want to serve your community? Not passion is a little bit more internal. It's inward facing. What can the world do for me? Right. I'm passionate about meditating. I'm passionate about yoga. I'm passionate about writing. Okay, great. Well, what's your purpose? How do you want to help other people? How can you use your gifts to make an impact? So, I think that that's an important point. And, even for my own thing, sometimes you do have to quit a job. If you're stuck in a position that's not the right fit, you might have to make a change. But for me, that process took, in many ways, a year. And even after I knew I was going to leave, I still stayed on for about 6 to 8 months because I needed to save money.
Yeah, and
so a lot more strategic about the process. And there's a lot of, in the new version, one of the things I added was a whole section about how to find more meaning in your current job. Right?
Yeah, so that's huge. And I mentioned this with Caroline Beaton, who I interviewed in a previous episode. And you also shared the story of Debbie in your TED talk with Goldie Blox. And I tell people now, like, I know it's difficult when you feel like you just have to jump ship, but see your current employer as basically free training or education in the sense of like you learning business skills. And also as an investor, so you don't have to worry about your new project bringing in the money. Your current employer is basically paying for you to be safe and stable while you build up your own thing to a point where it can replace. So I think that's really, really good advice too.
Yeah, and for those that don't know the story, Debbie, I think it's important. Debbie Sterling started a company called Goldie Blox, which is a toy company that teaches young girls engineering skills. So it's a toy company for girls to learn how to become an engineer, because there's so many toys for boys, like, you know, Thomas the Tank Engine and Legos and building toys for boys. But there's not many toys for girls to teach girls how to become engineers and builders. And so when she had this idea, I actually was friends with Debbie back in 2012 when she was just getting this company going. And now Goldie Blox has, you know, they had an ad in the Super Bowl. They've had YouTube videos with 20 million views. They're in Toys R Us and Walmart and toy stores all across the world. But when she was just getting started, she basically had, you know, a PowerPoint and a couple ideas and a sketch for what the toy might look like. And she was still working a job full time at a jewelry company in San Francisco as the marketing director for a jewelry company. And she didn't quit her job right away. Why? Well, first of all, she knew she was going to start this company. She was going to be a startup founder. So she knew she needed money. So she needed to save up money, which is a very good practical reason to stay in your job. And second of all, she felt like she was getting basically paid to go to business school. Instead of going to business school to get business skills and pay, you know, what is it now, $100,000, $200,000 to go to business school, she was learning day to day all these skills in marketing, retail, distribution, fulfillment, customer service, communications, strategic marketing that she knew she'd be able to apply to her own business when she left the marketing company. So it was a really strategic reason. I think it's an important example.
Yeah.
So, you know, one other thing I wanted to mention in the book in terms of, you know, kind of one of the core principles is this idea of, you know, we've been taught to climb this career ladder since a young age. And this ladder is kind of the thing that, you know, we hop on actually probably in, you know, elementary school and high school. We take AP classes. We have to, you know, apply to college and, you know, this kind of idea that you get better test scores and then you get into a better college and, you know, and then you get a better job and you pick a ladder and you kind of stay on it, right? You're like, okay, I'm going to be this is my major. This is what I'm going to be. You know, for instance, I studied film. So it's like, okay, you're on the film ladder, or I'm studied government. So I'm going into politics. And the problem with this ladder mentality is it just doesn't work in the current job market. The average person, the average millennial is changing their job about every 2 to 3 years. The average person of any age in today's job market is changing their job every 5 years because of rapid changes in technology, globalization. It's an unstable job market. We just don't know what's going to happen. The United States government has said that 65% of today's elementary school kids, that's kids, you know, between kindergarten and 8th grade, are going to end up in jobs that haven't been invented yet. They're going to end up in jobs we don't even know. We don't even know what the job title is. If we were to hear it today, we'd be like, what is that? Right? Which is the exact same thing if 10 years ago you had said, oh yeah, you're the social media manager for this company. People have been like, I don't exactly know what that means because social media wasn't really a thing 10 years ago, right?
Exactly.
So that's an important thing to remember. You know, so this idea of climbing the ladder just doesn't work. And what happens if you're, you know, 28 like I am, and you're kind of on this political track working in government, but you want to become a writer and you want to do something different? Do you hop off the ladder? Do you have to start from the bottom? Like, no. So I you know, kind of use a metaphor that was inspired by a friend of mine. This idea of kind of hopping, you know, a pond of lily pads. So instead of climbing a ladder that's, you know, leads one direction straight up, you think of your career as a pond of lily pads. If you think of a pond of lily pads, they're spread out in all directions. You can move in any direction, to the left, to the right. There's forwards, backwards. There's no, right or wrong. There's no, you're going forwards, you're going backwards. You're kind of doing something that you care about.
Yeah.
And if you think about the lily pads, they're all connected. Like the roots of the lily pads are all connected underwater. That's the roots. That's what you care about. That's your purpose. That's what's meaningful to you. But the surface might look very different. It might look, okay, I'm going to go volunteer for this nonprofit in India for 6 months. Then I'm going to run this podcast. Then I'm going to work for Google. Then I'm going to work for my friend's business. They're connected, but they might look very different. And this doesn't mean, again, this is not about quitting your job every 6 months. That's not very good for anyone. That's not good for yourself, your bank account, or your boss. But it does mean that you have to constantly consider what you care about and think of your, career in much more kind of flexible terms. And that the people that get ahead now in this market are going to be more flexible, take more risks, and experiment. Right. And the people that play it safe and kind of try to go in one direction that they pick at the age of 20 when they don't even really know who they are or what life has to offer are going to get stuck.
Yeah. Smiley, I want to be mindful of the time. I want to ask some rapid fire questions. You mentioned earlier, doing research to show publishers and whatnot that there is a demand for a book or whatever it may be. So I'm interested to hear, besides your book, what are some of the sort of must reads that you think all quarter-lifers should be reading?
So say that one more time. You're asking for book recommendations?
Yeah. So besides the QuarterLife Breakthrough, of course.
Oh yeah.
What other books do you think people in our generation need to be reading?
Cool. And yeah, I have if you go to my, my website, smileyposwolsky.com, I have a whole resources section, with inspiring books for 20 somethings and books for career inspiration. So I've got a lot, but, a couple right off the bat that I think are really relevant. I think folks should read The Defining Decade by Meg Jay. She has a TED Talk called Why 30 is Not the New 20.
Yeah, I love it.
It's a nice kick in the ass for people. I think the book Drive by Daniel Pink is really incredible, just about what actually motivates us. I love the book So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. That's all about why skills are really important. By getting good at something is going to help you get ahead. The Crossroads of Should and Must by Elle Luna is a really beautiful book. She's an artist that kind of wrote a book about the importance of following your passion and becoming an artist and channeling that. And then another, I love everything by Brene Brown. So Daring Greatly, or The Gifts of Imperfection, which is all about, being vulnerable and being open, and why vulnerability matters. One of my favorite books, I'll just add another one, because as a writer I love, is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah, I actually downloaded that. I got that on my Kindle this weekend. So it's short. You can read that in a couple hours. It's really about overcoming resistance and embracing fear, and, just this idea of getting that, that voice inside the head that keeps you from doing anything, how to battle it, right? How to win that inner battle. Yeah. And I think you had, Life After College on there too. And I'm actually
Life After College is great. Yeah. Jenny Blake.
It's a couple of weeks now. I'm going to be interviewing Jenny, so I'm looking forward to that.
She sent me a copy recently. Jenny actually is a friend of mine, and she blurbed for the QuarterLife Breakthrough, and she has a new book coming out, which is called Pivot, which is great. I recently read it, an advanced copy, which is all about making career pivots, and how to kind of, when you're in the middle of a career, but you want to do something different, how to strategically make that move. So it's really useful for people that are, kind of in the midst of their careers and trying to get to the next best thing.
Yeah. And we'll link up all those books you mentioned and your resources page in the show notes. Smiley, something I asked Doug Stewart in episode 22. He was the first person I asked, but I think I'm going to keep this as a regular question. It's quite a curveball, so sorry if it throws you a little bit. But if this was to become the most important thing for 20-somethings or millennials or quarter-lifers to listen to or read, what question would I need to ask you in this interview, and how would you answer that?
I would say something like, what's the thing you struggle with most? Or, what's the thing people don't see? What's the dark side of the work that you do that people don't see? And, I would answer it by saying, it's hard in a world and in kind of when people are coming to you for advice, and when you've, established yourself as a thought leader or writer or podcaster, speaker, to kind of admit that you don't know things, right? And I would say one of the things I struggle with a lot is, this idea of, people coming at to you like you're an expert or you're trying to give advice, but then sometimes being like, hey, I don't know. I'm still figuring it out, or I'm not sure. And this cult of, wanting people to be a guru that, show me the way, you have the answers. And sometimes I'm like, I do not.
Yeah.
And so I think that one thing I think people should often be asked, especially people that are in the space of building a community or writing books or giving advice or speaking, is what's the real talk here? Tell me when you don't know and what you say to people. And I've been often saying that a lot. If I meet someone at a speaking engagement and they're like, hey, like I loved your book. Tell me the answer to this. And I'm like, that's a great question. I have no idea.
Yeah, and I think
more people need to do that. I think people do respect it. I don't think it gets said enough, because I think everyone's trying to kind of play up this, oh yes, sign up for my email list. I have the answer. Sign up for my course. But, I don't want someone that like bullshits me. I want someone that's honest, right? So
yeah, that's the whole. I mean, you mentioned Brene Brown. That's Brene Brown in a nutshell, right there.
Correct.
Smiley, if people are listening to this and they want to check out your stuff and find out about the book, where can they do so?
Yeah, so the new book, the QuarterLife Breakthrough, comes out October 4th. You can pre-order it at thequarterlifebreakthrough.com from any vendor you want. So check out thequarterlifebreakthrough.com, and to learn more about my work and to check out some great free resources, go to smileyposwolsky.com.
Yeah, and we'll link up that and everything we mentioned in the show at briantier.com/023. Before I get to the final question, I just want to take this opportunity to acknowledge you for coming on and sharing your story and your knowledge of millennials and of finding meaningful work. I think at 28, I mean, I'm still 27 now, but at 28, a lot of people would have thought, oh, well, I'm too old to make a big career change now, or my dreams of being a writer and influencing people and making a difference are they're past now. But I want to acknowledge you for keeping that alive and for getting out of the good job. It's easy to quit when things aren't going well, but when we're in a comfy, secure, stable job, it can be even harder. So I want to acknowledge you for taking that step, and seeing how you've grown in the time since has been awesome. The final question that I have is, what one action can listeners take this week to start their own QuarterLife breakthrough or QuarterLife comeback?
Yeah, so I think it's all about starting small. So start with an action item, a 10-minute action item that gets you closer to your breakthrough. So a 10-minute action item is not like start a new business, make $1,000 a month from your business, write a book. But a 10-minute action item is press publish on a blog post that you haven't sent out yet, or buy the domain name for your new blog, or buy a book on Amazon that that you've been wanting to read, or set up coffee with someone that can give you some amazing advice about a new job lead, or even ask someone that you work with to have lunch that you want to talk to about something. So something that you can do in 10 minutes and just commit to doing that. Let someone else know. Maybe it's your partner, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your buddy, that you're going to do it, and have them text you in 24 hours to make sure you actually did it.
Love it. Smiley Poswolsky, thanks so much for coming on the QuarterLife Comeback.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, there you have it, guys. That wraps up part 2 of the interview with Smiley Poswolsky and episode 24 of the QuarterLife Comeback podcast. Biggest takeaway for me, definitely the analogy of the lily pads rather than a career ladder, where, under the surface, everything's tied together somehow at the roots. But, on the surface, it's not the case of moving in a straight line forwards or backwards or to the side, but it's just jumping around from different things. with the aim that, they all eventually tie to what you are working towards and meaningful work for you, as we discussed in part 1. Love to hear some of your takeaways by tweeting me at Brian Tier. And if you like this one, make sure you share it around with your friends on social media and sign up at QuarterLifeComeback.com to get all these interviews as soon as they go live. As always, you can get the links and resources we mentioned at the show notes, which for this one, this part 2 of the interview is at briantier.com/024. And until next week, keep creating your quarter life comeback.
Thanks for listening to the QuarterLife Comeback. Get started today by visiting briantier.com.